You are Locked On Braves Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni with you. After what was a long and not so great weekend of baseball for the Atlanta Braves down in Miami, well, the first game of their homestand did not start off on much of a better foot. A 7-1 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies. 4 straight losses for the Braves since they clinched the National League East. So a little bit of work maybe to be done to clean a few things up in advance of the postseason. But we'll get into all the particulars of this game and maybe just kind of how things are trending as we go along here on the postcast. Make sure you're subscribed here to Locked On Sports Atlanta right here on YouTube. Make sure you click that bell. You'll get notifications every time we drop a new episode. Leave us a like and a comment, even if you don't love what's happening on the field. None of us have any control over it, but we can talk about it right here. So let's do that, and make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Jake, it's been a minute. We last spoke under much, brighter circumstances, if you will. But as we've seen over the course of 162 games in a baseball season, even the best teams are going to run into some lulls, some skids, whatever you want to call it, some doldrums, if you will. But I don't really feel like there's too much that you can take out of this. As long as this club remains healthy, that's much of an indicator of what to expect in about 3 weeks when they really gear things up for the postseason run.
And that's the key right now. This team just stay healthy, especially, your first game after clinching, Acuña gets hurt and goes out and misses a couple of games. I mean, that right there should be, a red alert. Let's just stay healthy. I said it on my podcast, but I'm treating this as spring training and not necessarily focusing on the results as much as, guys staying healthy, getting tuned up and ready for the real thing in the postseason.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you want to sign me up for things I don't want to see, an injury to Ronald Acuña Jr. is probably at the top of that list. But an injury to anyone right now, not that there's ever a good time for it, that would be a lot more concerning than losing a handful of games. A couple that were kind of slipped away over the course of the weekend in Miami. Then you get the doors blown off in the finale. It was just a sloppy series worth of baseball. This one against the Phillies, an early homer from Ozzie Albies. Then it was the Phillies who kind of gave the Braves a taste of their own medicine. Let's talk about it. Game number 150 of the year. 7-1 loss for Atlanta. Phillies now 82-68. They hold that top wild card spot in the National League. 7 runs, all scoring on home runs. 7 hits, no errors, 5 men left aboard. Braves 96-54 now, still the best record in baseball. They did do a little something towards their playoff effort. I'll talk about that in a moment. A run on the Ozzie Albies homer, only 4 hits, 5 men left on base. Zach Wheeler's a tough customer. The Braves kind of roughed him up last time out. Not so much this time. He's 12-6 on the year. Kyle Wright takes the loss, 0-3 now. No saving a game that lasted just over 2.5 hours, and a paid crowd of 39,216 at Truist Park to see it. We'll get into some of the other particulars, not that there was a lot to talk about offensively, so I really feel like the focus, as we talked about, is things that you can do on the way to the postseason to get you, I guess, prepared, if you will. And for Kyle Wright, that's kind of the name of the game right now, Jake. You wanted to see that pitch count up. You wanted to see him maybe a little bit more competitive than he was in that first start against the Phillies. I feel like, if anything, on this one, there were a couple of pitches that I'm still kind of wondering how they left the ballpark, and a close call on a walk that might have made his start a little bit worse than it is as far as the line is concerned, with 4 innings, 4 earned runs, the 3 homers, 4 walks, 5 strikeouts, and 5 hits. What did you see out of Kyle Wright? Because I felt like there was a little bit of progress despite that line.
Yeah, I think last start, even in that one, I think you could call that a little bit of progress, not a ton, but even this one, I think you saw even more progress. Certainly not the line that you want. Tough if you're facing the same team, when you're trying to come back in, a week span, and it's the Phillies, which have a really good lineup. And this is a guy that still isn't stretched out all the way, that maybe should still be making rehab appearances in AAA, but Braves want to see what they have in him. And if he can get back, and again, I think there's a lot of more positives in this one to take out of it, but I think still pretty good ways to go for Kyle Wright to get to the point where you trust him in a postseason rotation. He just doesn't have the feel right now, mainly for that sinker. I think is a pitch that he's losing a lot of times. That curveball I think is really effective for him. 6 whiffs on 14 swings against it tonight. So I still think that's a really good pitch for him, but mainly just the sinker, the 4-seam fastball. The velocity is down on that a little bit. Again, the guy that's working his way back, but more so just the location. You mentioned a couple of home runs. I mean, it wasn't necessarily bad location, but just some really good swings by the other team. So it definitely a step in the right direction here for Kyle Wright in this one, I think.
Yeah, the Johan Rojas home run, the first one, I mean, that was one up around the eyes, it seemed like. I was surprised. He just snuck out of the ballpark. Bryce Harper sometimes, and I know some people hate this phrase, but you got to tip your cap every once in a while to a professional hitter that does what he did to a pitch out away, hitting it over the left field wall. That was the first couple of those, but it was too many of them. JT Realmuto with an absolute no doubter. There was really no question about that one. 3 home runs on the night for Kyle Wright. 78 pitches, though, Jake. That's another thing that obviously you wanted to see. Low 60s last time out. His last rehab start, I believe, was right at the 50 marker, but 78 pitches, 47 of those for strikes. And I felt like it was just a lot more competitive in the offings, not to become repetitive ourselves, but those were kind of the mile markers I was looking for Kyle Wright. And I know Brian Snitker talked about this in the postgame. For a kid that basically didn't have a spring training, had to kind of run himself right back into the big league rotation, ran into another recurrence of that injury, spent 4 months off, and has been trying to build himself back up. You just want to know what you have in Kyle Wright so that they can make decisions about their postseason roster, which, by the way, the last 4 games don't really change the outlook of where the Braves are heading. They've clinched a first-round bye already, home field advantage in the National League Division Series. There are some other things that they can focus on. And again, and I'll just go on the record as making a bold prediction. Braves are going to win another baseball game, I think, in 2023, maybe quite a few. But there are some things left to be played for. But figuring some stuff out in advance of that postseason, including what role Kyle Wright may or may not play, I think that's kind of important. And you needed to see some of these things out of him tonight.
It is definitely one of the things to watch for down the stretch. And a lineup that's, basically intact. You're not going to see any surprises there. And rotation for most part that it's going to be. In a bullpen, I think, as well. Kyle Wright's really the biggest question mark right now. Can he get back? Does he have enough starts? I think that's the biggest issue right now. I think he's going to run out of time to really get back to where you can trust him in a starting role. But again, maybe that happens. He probably gets at least 2 more starts, but I still think he does play some sort of role, whether it's as the starter, as a reliever. But you can see it. He's not stretched out. I mean, this is 2 games in a row now. He came back out with the 4th last time, couldn't get an out because obviously he's gassed. Came back out for the 5th, and this one, obviously still gas. Walked Bryce Harper after giving him that hit to Trey Turner, who was back to killing the Braves and everybody else. But just still, working his way back. That's just where he is in the progression, and I'm afraid he's just going to run out of time.
Yeah, that's possible, and we'll kind of see what these other 2 starts might hold for him. But as we saw with Kyle Wright in 2021, he played an important role by getting them some length out of the bullpen and covering some very important outs for him. So if he's able to do anything that even resembles that, even if that means perhaps not being on the division series roster, and we'll see how all this plays out. Honestly, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because there is a little bit of time to figure this whole thing out, but it's one of the possibilities. You want to explore those right now. And again, the Braves have a little bit of time to kind of reset a few things and not overtax, say, the bullpen, certain members of the starting rotation. We're seeing that with them taking it easy with Max Fried right now. Spencer Strider was a little bit under the weather and got a little bit of extra time. We'll see how all of that plays out over the next 12 games. We're going to talk a little bit about the Braves offense because there's not much to talk about. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about one of our great sponsors, which is Jase Medical. This episode of the Braves Postcast is brought to you by Jase Medical. And at Jase Medical, it is simple. You go online, you fill out a form, then you get your prescriptions and your life-saving medications right to your door. The Jase case gives you peace of mind because no one wants to be left just hoping to have access to their medication in the case of an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have that medication in hand. Right now, save more than $360 from Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Braves did not really have a whole lot to speak of offensively. It happened the second batter of the game. Ozzie Albies, a solo home run, one of just 4 hits for the Braves in this game. Ronald Acuña Jr., though, back in the lineup. Great to see that. He was squaring the ball up, had a double among his 4 hits. Little bit of history there, though I won't say it's too much, but most hits in a single season by a Braves player since 1996. Just one of the many accolades for Ronald Acuña Jr., but let's go ahead and put that to the side because, Jake, just having Ronald Acuña Jr. back in there after a little bit of an injury scare over the weekend in Miami, that was something that was very good to see in this game.
Yeah, definitely. You don't like a 7-1 loss, but, I think a lot of Braves fans, myself included, when we saw Ronald was back, and not just hearing that he's back, but the fact that probably would have played in those last 2 games where they wanted to get him off the turf there in Miami. So letting you know, not necessarily anything serious. And he had a couple of hard hit balls, had 111-mile-per-hour double off Wheeler, really good swing there. Also made a pretty nice running catch coming in, a ball in foul territory. So that's great to see. I mean, he's obviously, a big part of what the Braves do, both offensively and defensively as well in right field. So seeing him back healthy, just, for a fan, getting to watch him play is great, but just knowing that he is back pretty much to 100% and there's not any restrictions on him at the moment. That was a big sigh of relief for Braves fans on Monday.
Yeah, I would imagine maybe the biggest and most important thing for the Braves offense is having Ronald Acuña Jr. there to set the tone, because at this point, you're not going to be able to rely on the trade deadline to go remake your outfield. You need who you've got, and you need them to play the role that they're supposed to. And no one has a bigger role than Ronald Acuña Jr., with all due respect to some of the other Braves great sluggers, including Matt Olson, who's having a career year. I would think everybody would point to it and say, that's where our lineup starts. That's who sets the tone. And he has set the tone better than any hitter in the National League this year. So good to see Ronald back in there. 2 games that he missed because of that calf issue. Did not play in Miami over the weekend, but didn't sound like it was something that was too overly serious after coming out of the game. Good to find that out in reality, that you got Ronald Acuña Jr. back in this lineup. A 4-game losing streak for the Braves matches their longest of the season. Has happened a handful of times. Phillies, meanwhile, giving the Braves a taste of their own medicine in this one, as I mentioned at the top. 5 home runs to score their 7 runs in this game. And how about one from Kyle Schwarber, Jake? I don't know if it's landed yet. 483 feet, second longest home run in Truist Park history. That came in the 6th inning. Ronald Acuña Jr., the only man that's hit it any further at that ballpark. But Kyle Schwarber, if you make a mistake to him, as you've seen with many of these Phillies hitters, they've got a pretty dangerous lineup. They can hang a crooked number up in a hurry. And as the Braves saw up in Philadelphia, this is a lineup that power for power has a little bit of ability to punch back at the Atlanta Braves.
And I think it's why they are a scary opponent if you face them in the postseason, because I think they're one of the few lineups that can go toe-to-toe with the Braves. They have that much power up and down. And Schwarber, he may be batting 200, but like you said, you make a mistake against him, he will absolutely make you pay, as he did in that one. But this Braves lineup, I think you look at this one, obviously facing Wheeler, a really good pitcher. I know the Braves got to him last time, but obviously, he's had a lot of success against the Braves in his career. And you look at the bottom of the order in this one, nobody past Ozuna got on base in this game for the Braves. And they're just not typical of this Braves lineup. You're used to them feeding the top, and just wasn't the case. So you want to look on the bright side. Hey, Matt Olson got on base twice. The guys that drop their order, did some good things, but we're so used to 1 through 9 in this Braves order getting it done. And like you said, on this night, it was the Phillies.
Yeah, it was all Phillies as far as offense is concerned. The Braves kind of had that one little threat going in the 6th inning. They loaded the bases up with 2 outs. Marcell Ozuna with the strikeout, and that was really about as close as Atlanta got to maybe breaking through and starting to put together something that would resemble a rally to get back in that game. And, of course, the Phillies adding on some runs late to win this one handily. 7-1 was that final score. As we've talked about, and again, I just kind of want to go back to this because I feel like it's pretty much the most important aspect of this part of the season, because I know a lot of people look at this 4-game winning streak and the fact that the Braves have been outscored so lopsided in those last 4 games. But I do feel like as you look at some of the other options that the Braves are going to have in the bullpen, maybe with the return of Jesse Chavez down the line and with some other decisions that they can make for their postseason roster, having Ronald Acuña Jr. back, it was kind of the cautionary tale of how important it is to be healthy at this time of year. But with 12 games left to go, they need 4 wins to get to 100. That's always a nice mark. They came into the day with a 4.5-game lead over the Dodgers for the best record in the National League. And the Baltimore Orioles, I believe it was a 3-game cushion between the two clubs. That's going to be a battle that we'll see, I think, play out over the next, 12 or so days, Jake. But, this is an Atlanta Braves club that, even though it's fallen into some 4-game streaks, they've never let it go any further than that. And, of course, they've got that opportunity to turn things around behind Spencer Strider in the 2nd game of the series.
They do. And look, this team has done a great job of, when they've had these little streaks like this, of putting it behind them. And obviously, I got to imagine there's a little bit of, I don't want to say fatigue, but, certainly they've clinched everything up. There's, maybe not fully focused. I don't want to take, say anything about any particular Braves players in that regard, but I know they're all trying their best. They're playing for pride and doing what they can, but you got to figure the competitive nature of them has maybe dialed back a little bit here, but you like to see them at least play some competitive games. That's not what we've seen here lately. And when you got Strider coming back on the mound, and look, you've had a rehabbing Kyle Wright start. You've had Jared Schuster start. You had Elder pitch, who wasn't terrible. And you had Morton, who had a really bad inning, gave up 4 straight hits and a grand slam. So you're not exactly been pitching your aces in this one either. And the Braves will on Wednesday or Tuesday. And hopefully that, proves better results.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but something I just kind of had thought of a little bit earlier today. You just reminded me of it, though. But think about where the Braves were this time a year ago, heading into the final couple of weeks of the season. It had been an all-out brawl with the New York Mets just to try to win the division. I think if you were to ask people, when would you like to clinch? Would you like to do it a little bit earlier in September, or would you like it to have to go all the way down to the next to last day of the season? I think more times than not, people would take the scenario that the Braves are in now, because you have that opportunity not to just let your foot off the gas and stop paying attention altogether, put it in cruise control, but to at least be able to maneuver yourself towards the postseason in a manner in which you might be able to give certain guys, certain starters, certain key players if they need it. And I know Brian Snitker was asked about this today and said, hey, I'm probably not going to give a ton of days off to the everyday guys unless they just ask for one, because we are still trying to win some games. But I think this scenario is one you'd much rather be in than all the way down to the wire very last weekend of the season before you even know your fate.
No, absolutely. I mean, again, like you said, I think if you polled most teams, they'd say we want to clinch the division with 2.5 weeks left and then kind of line things up and rest some guys. So Braves have definitely put themselves in a nice position. But again, like I said, you would like to see them play a little bit more competitive baseball here down the stretch as you get geared up for the postseason and kind of get back into that mindset. But you still got a little over a week left before that happens.
Yeah, a little bit of time to go. We'll talk about game 2 of the series in a moment, but I'll tell you about our other great sponsor for this episode. It is Sleeper. The MLB playoffs are right around the corner, which means the clock is ticking on your chance to get 100 times your cash on daily fantasy baseball. Pick more or less stats for your favorite baseball stars, including home runs, hits, strikeouts, and much more for up to 100-time payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right. You could win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Braves send Spencer Strider to the mound in game 2 of the series, seeking win number 18 of the year, looking to perhaps strengthen that Cy Young case. This is a Phillies team that he faced last time out, a rematch against Christopher Sanchez, a lefty who also threw pretty well for Philly. He made a few mistakes. The Braves made him pay for it, but this was a pretty good game last week, Jake. And as a matter of fact, it was Spencer Strider who was on the mound the last time the Braves won a baseball game, so it would seem like maybe a very good trend or perhaps an omen for Atlanta to get back in that win column.
Like I said, I mean, the pitchers that the Braves have thrown out there lately, maybe not guys that you're necessarily going to count on, but Strider is one of your ace that you really need him going. And he's had a lot of success against the Phillies in the regular season. So hopefully an opportunity here to stop this little 4-game skid, get back to playing Braves brand of baseball. Good to see the offense going as well. Like you said, I know Sanchez threw a good game last time against them. I believe he struck out 10, but Braves have had a good time with lefties on the most part this year. So hopefully we see the Braves get back in the win column.
Hopefully so. It'll be a Tuesday matchup, 7:20 p.m. Eastern time, the first pitch, Spencer Strider and Christopher Sanchez of the Phillies, as the Braves look to even up this series and to end a 4-game losing streak. Once again, the Braves were on the wrong side of a 7-1 score tonight, but we appreciate you riding along with us. We'll be back with you throughout the series, throughout the week, and of course, all the way through October, as the Braves definitely have their eyes on a long run there. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube. Click the bell. You get notified every time we drop a new episode. Leave us a comment and a like. Share the show with a friend. We appreciate that. And subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, everyone.